Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us this evening. I'd like to introduce Mary. Mary Bild is a New England section member, and she's currently our governor for New England, and also the spokesperson for the Council of Governors. Mary has an amazing story to tell. Her life story's been really exciting. Aviation is a big part of it. And she has recently written a book, Finding Myself in Aviation. So I wanted to give her a plug for that. It's fantastic. I read it. And she also has a seaplane base, or she's actually retired from that. But I first met Mary when I went to earn my seaplane rating and spent the weekend in Maine. She was my instructor and then my examiner. It was a wonderful experience. Mary has a lot of respect from her peers. She was awarded the Award of Merit many years ago from the New England section members, and that is quite an accomplishment. Also, Mary has been involved heavily in the Air Race Classic. She has been recently a judge. Well, she'll tell us more about herself. And also she's a mother of two girls. So she's a very overall, she's learned to balance a career of aviation and family. So let Mary tell you a little bit more about herself and begin her program.
Thank you very much, Glenna. That's a very nice introduction. I appreciate that. Deb, do you want to put the 90? There we go. So this is about once a pilot, always a pilot. And I was asked to present this down at the Charleston International Conference this past July. And when I started it, I realized that there were so many things that I've done in the past that I don't do anymore. They've just, every once, they just sort of slipped away for one reason or another. So it's been an interesting journey putting these together and telling you about them. There are many things that I loved about flying. And my first job was scenic flights. I previously worked in a corporate office. First of all, I didn't start flying until I was 47. And that was in 1992. So my first scenic flight operation was in 1997. And prior to that, I lived in Massachusetts and I was in an office and I just knew that there had to be something else better to do with my life. I didn't know what that was, but I needed to find it. And I had read somewhere that you need to take your time away from everything that you do. You have to give up everything that you're doing and find that inspiration, or let the inspiration find you what you should be doing. What's your purpose in life? What's your true purpose in life? So when I was in the office, I couldn't wait for 5 o'clock. I couldn't wait for vacations. Was very unhappy there. I was doing a good job, but I was not happy. When I was doing scenic flights, I was working 7 days a week, 10, 12-hour days, and could not wait to go to work in the morning. Couldn't wait to get there. I absolutely loved it. On Wednesdays, I'm going to get a drink of water. If you can hold on a second. Excuse me. I'm very sorry, but you don't want me to go through coughing, that's for sure. So on Wednesdays, I was a Katahdin Wing member at the time. And on Wednesdays, my friend Jenny Jorgensen would come over. I didn't ask her to come and help me. She just showed up and we had the best time. She would take care of all the customers and I'd do the flying. And that started our friendship. And it's been a wonderful friendship. I never would have met all of the women that I know today all the women pilots that I know today if it weren't for the 99s. And so this is my 185. I flew a 172 the first year because had 180 horsepower because I didn't want to get into an unknown airplane. I had heard that the 185 was difficult to handle, and I didn't want to get into that with a new business in a new operation. And so I waited, and then the following year I bought this plane and I flew it for 3 years, and I also had a charter service with it too. And then at the end of the 4th year, the jet skis were a real problem. One time I came down over the causeway and you had to come over wires first, and it was very, very, very windy. The wind had picked up, a cold front had just come through, and it was very, very windy. And so I landed short so that I could just taxi into the dock. But as I flared to land, a jet ski with a young man on it came right out from the middle of my floats. And that was the first time that scared me half to death. And then another time, the same summer, I was coming down through the trees, over the beach and landing into the wind. And you know that when you're flying an airplane, you can see everything that's going on the ground. Well, I could see everything on the water. The boats, I could anticipate what they were doing. They didn't buzz around in circles, but jet skis I stayed away from because they didn't hear me, and they're in their own little world, and they could be zooming along and stop dead in their tracks and just do, a quick circle. So there were no jet skis around. When I landed, I was down in the water firmly enough so that I couldn't do a go around. A jet ski came around the corner and stopped right in front of me. He could not have been more than 20 yards away from me. I just had to shut the mags off because I would have chewed him up into little pieces. He was so startled that he stopped. And I thought, you know what? I don't want to take a third chance. I don't want to run into the possibility of this happening a third time. And I wanted to teach more. I had gotten to see a flight instructor's certificate the previous winter. I had gone down to Long Island, and I wanted to spend more time teaching. I had no idea I was going to enjoy teaching, but I certainly did. And so just at the same time, another 99 came to me, and she said, Mary, it was Jackie Rogers. She said, Mary, if you ever want to give up that lease, I'd be interested in taking it over. And I said, well, just so happens I am interested in doing it, Jackie. So she took that over. And then I went, Long Lake flows into Brandy Pond flows into Sebago Lake. And Brandy Pond was just a hop, skip, and a jump on the other side of the road. And my husband owned the property over there, and I started a seaplane flight school. And I've got some pictures of that. I'll show you in a second. But I loved the flight school, and it was just fantastic to live down on the point on Brandy Pond and walk to work each morning. And this was my office, and it was just, it was a dream come true. It really and truly was. I loved every minute of it. Then I ran that for 16 years, and we were very, very busy. I had, there were 2 of us doing flight instruction for a very long time. And then 2008 hit, and the business was hit like everybody else's business. And then it slowly built back up again, but never to the level that it was in the beginning. But Matt, at this year 16, Jim had enough of being around airplanes and wanted to spend more time up north. So he was spending more time up there, which he had every right to do. And Matt had taken over the scenic flight operation on Long Lake. And I was left at the seaplane base, the Brandy Pond seaplane base, by myself. Now, I could have hired people, but I just, I sort of whittled it down and just didn't take a lot of people. And I was also an examiner at the time. And I could physically do things. I could put things in the water. I mean, I could put the planes in the water. I could take the dolly out from underneath it, put the tractor away, teach all day long, and then do paperwork at night. But it wasn't any fun anymore. It just wasn't any fun. I like to be working with a group. So the seaplane base was sold. A buyer came along and they wanted to run the seaplane base and have it as a marina. Well, as it turned out, they just told us that so that we would sell it to them, because it's certainly not a seaplane. Well, it is a seaplane base, but you couldn't get a plane in there, and there's no more fuel there or anything. I had an honor system for the fuel. Any seaplane pilot could come in, take the fuel that he wanted, and make out a little invoice slip. And I would send them an invoice. And I never lost one single penny with that fuel, not a penny. And it was such a good feeling to have an honor system like that. Loved it. Then I did some air racing in that period of time too. I think my first air race was in 2006. And Jenny Jorgensen and I decided, well, she was willing to come with me. I wanted to race, and she was willing to come. And between the two of us, we had 5 airplanes at our disposal. We didn't own 5 airplanes, but we had them at our disposal. And the one that I was going to race was a Hawk XP. It had a 210 engine in it, but you can only run it full power for the first 5 minutes. And I thought, well, that's fine. I just won't run it. I will just run it for 5 minutes and then back it down for the race. But they don't allow people to do that because engines have been burned up in the past. People get so excited about the racing prospect that they leave the throttle in full power, and they get into trouble with their engine. There's a reason why it's restricted like that. So, it was right before the race. And I said, oh my gosh, what on earth are we going to do? So I had a thought. I called Bob Whiplinger from Whipline Floats. And I said, Bob, I think I have an advertising opportunity for you. And he said, really? He said, what is it? So I told him what I had in mind. And he said, well, let me think about that. I think it was a Tuesday that I gave him a call, either Monday or Tuesday. And he said, give me a call on Friday. So I waited and I waited and I waited. So finally I called him. I wanted to make sure he didn't go home early on Friday. And I called him, it was either 4 or 4:30. And he said, Mary, I think I would like to do this. He said, I've got a 182 on amphibs, and you can come out and take that. So I was beyond delighted, absolutely beyond delighted. And I called Jenny and said we were all set. We made arrangements we took a bus down to Boston. We took a commercial flight out to Minnesota, taxi to the hotel. And on the morning, I think it was Tuesday morning, if I'm not mistaken, we walked down the hill, or Monday morning, we walked down the hill to the airport and sat down it was a very little round table, but a high, like a bar, high tops. And they brought the paperwork down. The paperwork was in perfect order, except that my name was not on the insurance form. And that was one of the requirements for the air race. So they took the paperwork upstairs, put me on the forms, brought it back down, and handed me the keys. Well, nobody's ever handed me the keys before, ever, for an airplane. I've flown 182s and had a good amount of time in them, and certainly had flown amphibs and had a good amount of time in those, but never that combination. Well, I wasn't going to tell them that. Of course, I was very brave. And we walked home with the keys. And the next morning we came down, we got in the airplane and we flew to Mesa, Arizona. We had a stop, one stop and spent the night, but we continued on our way. And when, I tried all the way down to run full power. And every time I did, everything was electronic. Everything was electronic on the panel. And every time I tried to run it full power, which of course you have to do on an air race, or at least you're expected to, everything would flash and flash and flash and flash. I said, oh, I can't do this. I can't do this. I'm not going to burn up all of these avionics. There's just no way. And so I got down there and I had never flown at full power for any length of time. And so there was this little bit of a tiny woman coming out, and I thought she was one of the judges or something. She didn't look like, she was older than I am now. Let's put it that way. I'm 70, almost 78, and she was in her 80s at the time. And anyway, I said to her, I said, excuse me, but how do you keep the engine cool enough? Do you leave the cowl flaps open, or, do you not run at full power sometimes? And she just stopped and she looked at me. She said, honey, if you don't use full power, you should go home. So I said, okay. Well, when we did get in that plane, there's a lot more to the story, a lot more to the story. But when we did get in the plane, I never thought another thing about it. That plane was flown full power the whole time. I never had any trouble until we were in between El Paso and the Mexican border. We were following the river, the Rio Grande. And I had my eyes on the GPS so that I would stay right on it, because we had certain waypoints where we had to report in, and we were threatened with our lives. Do not go into El Paso's airspace and do not go into Mexico's airspace. So I wasn't going to do that. I was staying right over the river, and I was going along, and then all of a sudden, the whole panel, every single thing on the panel went out. Everything. I didn't have the GPS, I didn't have radio, didn't have a transponder, didn't have anything. So I looked up to find the Rio Grande, and there was no river. So I said to Jenny, where's the Rio Grande? She said, I don't know. You don't know either. No, I've been looking at it. I can't see it. She said, I've been looking at the GPS. So I said, okay. It looks like there's a bend in the river up there. We just have to head for that. I said, we'll probably get arrested when we get to the next stop, but we're going to continue. There's nothing more we can do. So we got to our next stop, and she ran in and took care of the fuel slip, and I stayed with the airplane, and we got out of there as fast as possible, and nobody's ever found us and nobody's ever arrested us. But anyway, so then we did that. And then each year, and Jenny and I, what I realized what a history we have of flying together. On the next slide, you'll see that we did the poker run together. And she lives over in Bath with her husband, and I lived in Naples. And when I didn't have the scenic flight operation, we never saw each other. So the poker run we always fly it on floats at the Greenville fly-in, which is the second weekend in September. And the flight itself, this is the sample. What you're seeing now is the sample of what was flown this year. They changed it all up and made it a little different. But the flight itself is about 2.5 hours, which is a great length of time. Most of all airplanes can do that and then get fuel when they get back. But it took Jenny and me all day. We knew right where we were going. We knew who we were going to see. In the first place, we'd have homemade donuts and coffee. The next place would have some more coffee and some chocolate chip cookies, homemade chocolate chip cookies. These are all sporting camps that we were going to. Very expensive places to stay. And all we needed to do was pick up a card for the poker run. And then we'd have lunch at one place, and then the Suncook Lake House burned down. So then we switched over to Jenny. I would have to ask her name. I ask her the name of it, but Bradford Camps. There we go. And on Munsungan Lake, we started to have lunch there, and then we would stop in the Millinocket Seaplane Base and get fuel, and then come back to Greenville. And honestly, it took us all day. We just always had such a good time. Now, I also loved, but I don't do that anymore because I sold my airplane in 2019. I didn't, I just didn't have anybody to fly with anymore. And that plane wasn't a school plane. It didn't have any controls in the back. And, but I could fly it. I flew it to Oshkosh and so forth. I'll get into that in a minute, but I loved ski flying with it. I just loved it. However, and when we did ski fly, it wasn't a question of whether we were going to fly each weekend or not. It was where were we going to go? And there were always 4 or 5 of us who went, But the last year I had my plane, Jim had given up flying, and two of the pilots that were always with us had passed away. And Al Caruso was flying jets, so he wasn't available. And I was left alone, and it's just not safe to go doing the type of flying that we used to do by myself. If I stopped at an isolated lake or pond or something, and I couldn't get the plane started, it's just too cold up there in the wintertime. And this is a picture on Moosehead Lake, and obviously wasn't that cold that day, but there were days that it was bitter cold. And if the plane had an issue, we always had another plane to hop into, so that was fine. So with that being gone, I thought, well, I'll try it one more winter. So in 2019, I had the floats taken off and the skis put on, and I put it on the market thinking I would sell it in the spring. And when I was on my way to the airport the following day, the broker called me and said that he had sold it. I said, "You didn't." He said, "Well, I did. I certainly couldn't kid you about something like that." I said, "Well, I didn't think you were going to sell it that fast. I'm never going to give you another airplane that I don't really want to sell." So anyway, long story short, it was sold within 24 hours and I was out without an airplane. So, you go along and you change your life and you try to accept it the best you can. And I got more involved with the 99s and Jenny would always come over and I'd fly with her, and, other people would do the same thing. Jackie Rogers would. And I just didn't have my own plane. And so you just, you try to do the best you can. So one of the other things that I used to do was flying to Oshkosh, which I loved. And I don't think I told you that I went through this story twice today. So I'm thinking that I've already told you, but I know I haven't. The trip from Auburn Lewiston to Oshkosh is a 10-hour flight, and I break it up into 2 days. And I had some maintenance that needed to be done. It wasn't starting properly on a hot start. So I stopped in Oxford, and he took a while to find out what the problem was and to fix it. And then I was on my way. So I was talking to Portland Control, ATC, and they turned me over to Boston. And when I called in, the controller said, "Oh, 3-3 Mike, are you on floats this year?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Amphibious floats, right?" And I'm thinking, I don't know anybody in Nashua. I had no idea who this guy is. I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, where are you off to today?" I said, "Well, I'm going to Syracuse and I'm going to spend the night. And then tomorrow I'm going to continue on my way to Oshkosh." "Oh," he said, "I am jealous." Then there was this big long pause. "Are you married?" I said, I was laughing so darn hard. I said, "Yes." And, I'm kicking myself, and I've kicked myself ever since. I didn't say, "Yes, but I'll pick you up. I'll give you a ride to Oshkosh. What time do you get off of work?" Well, I didn't say that. Anyway, I've always had a good time telling that story. That week in Oshkosh, I only went there. So, I wanted to go right directly to the field so that I could camp under my wing, and I didn't want to miss anything. I wanted to be able to see everything that was going on and be part of everything during the day. But I knew I'd need to go back and take a nap because it's exhausting walking around there. It's fun. It's, everything is good about it, but I would get tired. So I wanted to do that. And then I wanted to be there to watch the night shows, because the year previous to my flying out there, I went out with someone else in her plane, and another 99. And but we got tired and we went home, late in the afternoon. So I wanted to see the night shows. Well, I did take a nap every day, and I was asleep at 8 o'clock every night. Except for one night, I did watch the air show, but I slept through everything. I was so tired. It was the most amazing week. I was just finished tying up my plane for the second time because it had to be moved when I first got there. And this little golf cart came along with a man and his wife. And he said, oh my, this really is a lovely plane. He said, would you mind moving it up to the Vintage Air Park? I said, no, I had learned a long time ago, you don't refuse any opportunities. I said, no, I don't mind at all. So I took down all the tie downs. I left my tent set up and I went down to the Vintage Air Park. And what he usually does is he changes the venue every day. You know, one day might be super cruisers, another day will be lady pilots, lady tailwheel pilots, tail draggers, they call them. And another day it might be, you know, Cessnas. Another day it might be something else. He changes the venue every day, and he talks to the pilots, and the pilots talk about their airplanes and where they came from and so forth. Well, he took my plane, and instead of turning it towards the bleachers, he turned it on the corner facing out towards the main thoroughfare there, and he left it there all week long. So my tent is back with my tie downs where my plane's supposed to be, and my plane is down in Vintage Air Park. So the night before I left, I took the plane up and I slept under the wing for one night. But I'm not complaining because I won a prize. I had to go on a photo flight. It was just an amazing week, absolutely amazing. So I've been back every year, and I never think that the Oshkosh could be any better than that week, and it is every time. It's just terrific. So I don't fly my own plane to Oshkosh anymore, but I will go with someone else. Sometimes other people like you to go with them to help them out. They need another set of eyes. Or if that doesn't work out, if the weather doesn't work out, or the plane doesn't work out, I've gone commercially and stayed in hotels, and that's worked out just fine. So another thing that I used to love to do was fly to Alaska. That I liked very much. And on the next slide is a typical route that I would take. And flying to on this particular route, I wanted to go to Toronto City Center, where the airport is on an island. And so I went there, and then I hopscotched over islands up to Sault Ste. Marie, and then went as straight as I could to Cut Bank, Montana, and then follow the Alcan. I would pick up the Alcan Highway a little further north and fly northwest to Anchorage. And I've made that flight 4 times, not exactly the same route. It's changed because of the weather, or we wanted to do something different, but I've flown it solo twice. And one time we went to the 99s conference up there, and I flew with a 99 up, and Lori Plord, and she flew home commercially, and I flew home with Denise Waters. Denise Waters had flown to Anchorage commercially, and she flew home with me as far as Syracuse, where I dropped her off. And so that has been wonderful. I have no regrets with that, but it would take in the XP, that has 120 knots true airspeed, and it would take 31 hours to get there and 30 hours home consistently for the 3 years that I used that plane. And the 4th time I went, I flew in the Super Cruiser, the picture that you just saw at Oshkosh, and the weather was just horrendous. The previous times, the first 3 times, we would lose one day because of weather, and the rest of the time was perfect. We were perfectly able to fly without any problems at all. With the 4th trip, we had days that we would have to stay in some places, days. And I thought we were never going to get there. And I think it took, instead of 6 days to get there, it took us 10 to get there. And on top of that, the other trip would take 61 hours round trip. And with a Super Cruiser, 99 hours. So I am not making that trip again unless I go in a much faster airplane. I would be more than happy to do that, but not unless I'm in a much faster airplane. So the next slide, you'll see what it looks like and why I enjoy this flight so much. This is a view after leaving Whitehorse in Canada on the way home. That's the Alcan Highway, and it's just spectacular. The route is just spectacular through Canada, and they don't like you flying direct. They want you to follow the highway because if you have any trouble, it's perfectly legal to land right on the road. And I did have a situation one time where we got weathered and I had to climb up through the clouds, and that was very unfortunate, very uncomfortable. The clouds just came down and just surrounded me. And so I climbed up and hoping that I wouldn't hit a mountain on the way. And I got up to the minimum altitude for IFR flying, but I was picking up ice. So that was at 9,000 feet. I was picking up ice and I had to come down. I also had, I had two sets of charts, VFR and IFR. And I knew that the minimum safe altitude for VFR flying was 8,000 feet. So I told the controller I was going down. He said, "You can't go down because we can't see you." I said, "I can't stay here. I don't have any equipment to remove the ice. I'm going down to 8,000. So every 5 minutes, he asked me what my location was. I had to give him my latitude and longitude. You would think that that would be comforting, but it was very disconcerting because the reason he was asking me is because they would not be able to find me. There were just mountains. There were no houses. There were no fields. There were no roads. It was just mountains between one airport and the other. And, but I got into the next airport and called and canceled my flight plan. And he said, "We are so sorry. They don't have any forecasting capability in Canada and over in Western Canada because of the mountains. The mountains interfere with their radar." And a low had come in off of the ocean, and it had been there for 2 weeks, and people had been traveling back and back and forth without any trouble. But this particular day, those clouds just came right down. And I said, "You don't need to apologize. It's not your fault." I said, "It's my responsibility." And the weather was bad, but we're here. We're safe. Nobody's hurt. Big plane's not hurt. And so we're fine. So with all that being said, and the things that I don't do anymore, I have the 99s. I'm more active in the 99s now. I never would have met all of these women pilots. My friend Jenny and I, on the next, oh, there she is. She's, that's quite a fish that she has. I wouldn't mind fishing. I just don't want to touch the fish. Somebody else would have to touch it. But Jenny sails, and she lives over on the coast, and I live in Naples. And so sometimes I go over there. Sometimes she comes over to my place. When I had the seaplane, we'd fly together. And we just become very, very good friends. I'm very fortunate. And I have many other friends in the 99s. The next slide shows her with her Citabria, which is absolutely beautiful. And she shares that with Lisa and Steve and her friends. And it's a lovely plane. I had the pleasure of flying in it last week with Jenny. Every once in a while, she gives me a call, and I'll drive over and fly with her. So it was really fun. And then the Katahdin wings are small, but we are mighty. There was a terrible, terrible forecast that night, and we had a meeting to attend. And we had to attend because we were preparing for a section meeting. So the four of us were there. There's Twyla, Lori, and Eva. Now, Eva lives on an island, and I don't know if she came down that day to attend the meeting or not, but she goes to great lengths to participate. And sometimes if she can't make a meeting, she's always there on a Zoom. And Lori and Twyla is our secretary, and Lori is the treasurer of the Katahdin Wings. And so we were doing coasters for the section meeting. So small but mighty we are. I encourage all of you to attend chapter meetings. I know they're boring. I know, they're not always a lot of fun. They can be fun. Just people have to be creative with them, but have dinner first. Get to know some of your chapter members. I'm sure it's in your case too, but in our case, everybody is spread out. So I usually just say, hey, who wants to have dinner at Max tonight? Or who wants to go to the Thai restaurant for dinner tonight? And those that can make it. And we have our dinner and then we go to the meeting. And it's really a lot of fun. And when you go to section meetings, share a ride, share a room with someone so that you can, get to know someone well and drop a car off on a parking spot and ride together. 2 meetings ago, so in the spring, the Connecticut chapter had a wonderful section meeting with over 50 people attending. I don't remember how many attended. I'm going to say 54, but that's a guess. They called every single one. They had a phone tree and they called every single member in their chapter. And they sponsored 10 young pilots. Some of them were student pilots and some of them were private pilots, newly minted private pilots. And they sat all together, so they got to meet each other. We had a wonderful speaker, a wonderful evening, and a terrific meeting the next day. And Betty Erickson was there. She's a former governor of the New England section, and I have never seen her. I've been a member since 1995, and I've never seen her at a section meeting. And she and her husband were there, David. And it was just great to see them. It really and truly was. So the Katahdin Wings are going to carry on that same tradition and calling other members so that everybody can't escape knowing about the section meeting. I have the honor to be a governor. I wasn't able to take this before when I was asked to do it, and I'm finally able to do it, and I really feel it's quite an honor to participate at this level. And on top of that, I was asked to be the spokesperson for the Council of Governors, which means it's my responsibility if the board needs information to get out to everyone right away. They send it to me, and then I get it out immediately to all of the governors across the world. And I was setting them up on WhatsApp one time, and I was having trouble with the international ones. I didn't know you had to add a little plus sign. And Nevadita Basin from India texted me. She said, would you like some help with that? Well, first of all, I didn't have any idea how she knew that I was on there or how that I was having trouble or whatever. I mean, I was in my own kitchen struggling with it. And so she's in India, in the country, India. And she came and she helped me. She showed me what the problem was. I got it fixed. But I said, she was a 787 pilot and soon to be retired. And I said, Nevadita, how did you manage that in India? I said, it's so difficult for women to get ahead. She said, I never took no for an answer, and I worked really, really hard. And that's how she became so successful. She's now on the board. She's one of the directors for the international board, and just so supportive and so helpful. If I have any trouble with anything, she's right there to help. She's right and smart and bright and ambitious. It's wonderful to work with some of these women. A lot of the women, I just came from Oklahoma at the board meeting that I had to attend the board meeting for the first time, actually, because I was isolated because of COVID and couldn't go to the other meetings. And this is my 3rd year as governor. And so a lot of those women, I know they're friends because I've either raced with them or I've judged the races that they've raced in. And no, it's just wonderful. The 99 is just terrific. I also monitor the 99's listserv, and this is something I would strongly encourage any of you to get involved with. First of all, some of us who have been flying for a long time can benefit our well-being, but others' well-being by being mentors. It's so helpful to be a mentor. And if you're on the listserv, you will occasionally, there are not a lot of emails. It's not one of those pesky ones that you get bogged down with a lot of emails. Sometimes it's just one a day, sometimes two, but not many. So I'm one of the monitors. There are two of us. And if it's just, if it's not appropriate, it doesn't get allowed on. But sometimes people are asking questions about finding a good flight instructor, and then they'll get support. If there are too many emails going back and forth, then they go directly to the person's email and talk to her personally rather than clogging up the listserv. But today, for instance, there was one woman who was picking up a plane. If it went through the pre-buy, okay, she was picking up the plane and flying it home, but she didn't have any mountain experience. So two of the women chimed right in from the Air Race Classic, because we've done a lot of mountain flying, and told her exactly where to go, what airports to go to, gave her a list of the airports. They're taking over low territory. I didn't happen to look at the route to see if they were going over a road or not, but when I fly from Seattle coming east, I follow the highway. So you can land anytime you really need to. And if somebody objects to it, well, you just apologize, because you're going to be safe and you're going to live if you land on the road, not in the trees, not in the mountains, not in the side of a mountain. And there are little grass strips all along the way too. So there are a lot of people out there who are really, really willing to help. The way you get on the listserv is to sign up on Google Groups and search for the 99s. And then you request to be involved, and then you will be allowed on. So then my biggest recommendation is to get involved. Volunteer, take a board position, organize flyouts, help with functions, go to chapter and section meetings, share rides. And in addition to that, actually Nevadita suggested this at our last board meeting, organize some non-aviation events to get the people who don't have airplanes, who don't fly frequently, or perhaps don't fly at all anymore, to be involved. You go to the movies, go for a hike. I had dinner the other night with two women who climbed Amelia Earhart Mountain. It was a 5-day backpacking trip, and there were 12 99s that do it every year. Well, they did it, there were 12 on that particular trip that she was on, that they were on. And, but the trip is every year. And I think that's pretty amazing. There's no way that I could do that anymore, but there are people out there that could. And they're just so excited to be with other 99s. You just imagine the conversations that they have. So, and I would also recommend that you write down your experiences, write a memoir. I have written a memoir, and it's called Finding Myself in Aviation. And I have all of those memories to hold near and dear to my heart. I'm not going to forget them. And I can share them with other people. It's not just about, my memoir is not just about aviation. It's how aviation transformed me, because I was a different person before I started flying. And when I felt so much more respect for myself, I changed my life. I have truly changed my life. And we all have a story. I'm not the only one. We all have a story in aviation, and mine's a lot more than just about aviation. So it just came out in July, and I'm already on my second printing. It's been very successful. So then you never know what's next. You never know what's going to happen. So Matt, that I've mentioned to you before, okay. I was just going to say, don't go to the next slide, but there we are. It's okay. No, you've already done it. Matt called me in the middle of October, And he said, Mary, I've just bought a Super Cruiser. And the Super Cruiser is the model plane that I always had in my seaplane school. He said, I just bought a Super Cruiser. Would you be willing to do the flight training for me? Because I'm still doing, Matt was still doing the scenic flights. I said, of course I will, Matt. I'd be happy to. The very same week, my very first student that I had called me. Oh, excuse me a sec. He called me, and his name is Stephan, and he flies caravans now on amphibs from Boston Harbor down into the East River. And he hires pilots, but they don't necessarily have a seaplane rating. And Mary, would you please give them a seaplane rating? So 1 week was just like, I can't believe that this is happening to me. I thought I was done, and here I am back seaplane training again. Just tickled to death. So the next slide will show you what it's like to be a flight instructor after a student has built up the confidence to fly that amphibious plane that's in the background and pass a seaplane check ride. That's how happy he was. Being a flight instructor is just the best thing in the world. So on the next slide, remember the dream. Remember all the fun that you've had. Remember all of your fun experiences. It doesn't matter if you fly or not. It does not matter, because once you're a pilot, you're always a pilot. So thank you very much for coming today. And I hope some of you have some questions, because I'm more than happy to answer them for you.
Hi, everyone. I'm a student pilot. I'm working on my private pilot in Southwest section. It was really great presentation. I took a lot of memo, and then I feel about the writing a memoir about like finding myself in aviation. Like it's all about like how aviation changed my life. It's totally get it, because I'm finding my way to I feel like it's transforming. It's
Yes.
totally different person. But I'm having a hard time. It's hard. Beginning, it's a totally new words. A lot of studying, definitely. I'm definitely challenging my instructor. But if there is any, if there's any way, if you could give those new student pilots to maintain the fun part. I remember my goal. I remember my dream. I definitely want this, but it's definitely requires a lot of hard work. And then sometimes like that goal, like I have to get it. That kind of like overrides my joy. So if you guys have any special tips for those to keep it fun, what will be that one? Like, if you guys have any.
Well, for me, I'm a former designated pilot examiner, so I have a lot of ratings and a lot of hours and everything, but I didn't have any goals. So every time I reached, like when I reached my private pilot certificate level, I was just delighted, and I could have fun and fly. Then I decided to get an instrument rating, and that's a lot of work. But then when I got that, well, that was great. And the next step just kept coming to me. The next best thing to do. Airplane became available, then a seaplane became available, then the seaplane base became available. So I didn't put myself in the position of having a lot of pressure. I didn't have to get it done. But the easiest thing for you to do is to try to fly at least once a week, if not twice a week. Because if you're not flying regularly, it makes it very difficult for yourself. But does anybody else have some suggestions? It's a lot of work. There's no question about it. But the accomplishment is going to be far greater than, and you'll have fun eventually. If anybody else has some suggestions, we're all ears. But join the listserv. I hope you took some notes on that because that's a really good place and you'll be in touch with other student pilots there too. Go to Google Groups, okay, and put in 99s. Okay. All
I
right.
believe I am in the Google group of 99.
Okay, good. Oh, good.
Yes.
Okay. Well,
I don't have any big goal. I just want to get my private pilot. I haven't even solo yet and haven't even done any cross country yet. So right now my goal is I want to go for some cross country. I want to go other places. That's my goal right
you
now.
will. You will.
Well, thank you for your tip.
Yep.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yep. You're welcome. I'm glad you were here.
Well, Mary, I would like to thank you. I know Glenna and I really enjoyed working with you on this. This was a great start to bringing the webinars back again after our summer and half fall hiatus, but this is a lot of fun.
Well, thank you very much. It was a pleasure working with you too, Deb and Glenna, as always.